All right, my ABN AMRO friends are on. Hello, hello.
Hello, good
Hi.
morning.
Are both of you together on the same mic and presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great, great. Please introduce yourself so that people who know who we're talking to.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Wiebe Roos. I'm being hired by ABN AMRO since 2016, working as a CI/CD consultant and engineer, mainly focusing on building a container platform with a lot of container security aspects, building it for the enterprise. So the customers right here are all of the development teams.
Excellent.
Next to me is Dominik.
Yeah. So hi everyone. So my name is Dominik de Smit. I'm the team lead of the secure coding team within ABN AMRO. We help our developers to go through the DevSecOps journey. So we help with both the statistical analysis of their source code as well as topics, for example, like container security and secrets management.
All right, Dominik, for people that don't know, what does ABN AMRO do?
So ABN AMRO is a large Dutch national bank. What they do is they create a lot of IT-related products for the banking industry, for customers in the Netherlands. Mainly the headquarters is in Amsterdam, but also abroad. And the organization is right in the middle of a transition from a typical waterfall organization towards Agile, and now we have the movement of DevOps and DevSecOps. Mainly focusing now on delivery of applications, more faster feedback, and security is of course a very important aspect, especially because we have a big movement of applications to the public clouds.
Yeah, your team is doing some fascinating stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing what you've been working on. So whoever is running your presentation, please share the screen and I'll get you set up and locked in.
Okay.
I see myself over and over again. There we go. All right.
Now you should be able to see the presentation.
That's good. You want to change the slide just so I can verify it's changing?
Okay. Yeah.
You're good to go. Thank you. I'll be in the background if you need me.
Okay, thank you. So we can start?
Yes, please start.
Okay, so perfect. So we already got a slight introduction. My name is Wiebe Roos. These are my details here. I'm working at ABN AMRO for 2.5 years right now. And I think it's very important to mention here, we are both in centralized teams. We do the rollout and implementation of all kinds of innovative projects and tools for all of the development tools. We interact with a whole bunch of stakeholders and other teams, for example, the security department, business departments, CADM, that's like the chief architect. And we try to collaborate as much together to bring everything for the developers from an enterprise perspective. And with that, security is a very important aspect. And today we'd like to talk about the journey of containers, and we call it containers is just another piece of the puzzle, and it's very important to protect them. And we also talk about Sonatype's products that are being used. Next to me is Dominik. He can do another short introduction.
Yeah, I see. So my name is Dominik Smit. I see you made a small typo. I'm definitely not the founder and CEO of ABN AMRO. But I'm the team lead of the secure coding team, like I mentioned earlier. So we help our developers transition to the DevSecOps journey, and we help them with different aspects such as statistical analysis, finding and having insights in their issues in their products, and next to that also topics like container security and secrets management.
Okay, thank you, Dominik. So what exactly is ABN AMRO? So we are one of the leading banks in the Netherlands. We have a very big income. We have an operating income of 8.5 billion euros. That's very important. In this case, we have a lot of customers worldwide, employees, more than 22,000 employees worldwide. Our headquarters is in Amsterdam. We're in one of the IT buildings right here, where all of the innovation is happening and a lot of dev teams are located. As of now, we have more than 450 agile teams. The number is growing every year. We have a lot of teams in the Netherlands, and we have a lot of teams in India. We have different outsourcing partners or vendors, how you want to call it. And in the end, we have more than 5,000 people in IT. And from the perspective of the teams what we are working at, we have to serve all of these people with tools and products that will help them to deliver their applications, to develop their applications, and to deliver their applications in the end towards a production environment. So the last couple of years, ABN AMRO was in a transition and a reorganization, mainly starting from waterfall towards agile to DevOps right now. And of course, we are a bank, and we are security is very important with us. So we're now moving from DevOps, and we're accelerating to also include the security part. So we also do a lot of DevSecOps related topics. We already had some presentations and slides about our continuous integration aspects. One of the biggest continuous integration platforms that we run is based on Jenkins. The last couple of years, we worked on the transition from Jenkins on-prem to the Jenkins environment in AWS. And it's very important to mention here that in the Jenkins on-prem, it was completely based on VMs. We run more than 100 VMs, all being created and maintained manually. We shifted towards containers in 2018. We now have like 50 teams already running on Jenkins in AWS, out of a total of about 300 to 400 teams. So we are very proud of that number, because the number of teams moving to the Jenkins in AWS, the Jenkins Enterprise, that number is growing every month. So with that, we can slowly decommission Jenkins servers in the on-prem data center, and it really accelerates the whole way the business is being done, the way we can deliver features. So we introduced this slide. How do we smash our business bottlenecks? Yeah, one of the biggest bottlenecks was the maintenance of the VMs and the way people interacted with the Jenkins servers. Imagine if you have 400 teams running on a couple of Jenkins servers. If one goes down, in total we had like 10 Jenkins masters running in parallel. If one goes down, it will really affect like 30 to 40 teams. So it's now all being shifted towards containers using Docker in AWS. And every team will have its own Jenkins server. So we are shifting from centralized control towards team autonomy, and it greatly reduces the downtime if something goes wrong. It greatly improves the flexibility for the teams, because they can quickly spin up a new Jenkins master if it's needed. And the Jenkins masters are per team. So they are specialized in whatever they need. They're not being bothered by anything that they don't need, because it's like, it's like a specialization for those teams dedicated to their workloads. And with this shift, we kind of introduced the concept of containers. In 2017, there were just some small proof of concepts being run. We now have it on scale. We now have it from on-prem towards AWS. And Jenkins is, of course, a very big use case. And now we see containers everywhere. People are using Dockerized pipelines. We call it cloud native pipelines, pipelines for the enterprise. It's like standard pipelines based on Docker container technology. And it also helps teams to create their own Docker images and Docker containers to, in the end, deploy their containers on for example, on a Kubernetes cluster or on ECS, for example. So with all of that, we noticed container security is a new topic. And there's a whole bunch of presentations that we did with about container security. And it's very important to have that addressed on all of the layers in your organization. Very simple said, we can identify like 3 layers. The source code layer, the static code analysis in this case. We can see we need container security from a build perspective, checking dependencies which are in the containers, but also on runtime. Dominik will add some more information towards it. And what we see right now, and that's how why we choose this title for this presentation, is containers are now everywhere, and we treat containers just like software artifacts. It's not just somewhere, it's not just middleware from our perspective, it's been treated like artifacts. And in such a case, we can elaborate a little bit more about what's in the contents of the containers and how do we treat it. So now Dominik will take over.
Yeah, thanks, Wiebe. So I want to do one step back, because when we create containers, we are going to put our products or solutions inside it. So what is really important is, even though containers are getting more popularity and are increasing in the banks, it's still really important to have the statistical analysis of your source code in place. So we still, we scan all of our source code that we put inside of our own containers. And what for an enterprise is especially really important is that you do this with the development community together. So you define what kind of policies and what kind of security defects we really don't want to have. And this is really important, because once you start basically breaking builds or doing any other of the quality gate keeping, people have to know that everyone is standing behind it. So, for example, what we did on the statistical analysis part is that we also made sure that we had an automated process of addressing false positives. So no matter what kind of language you have and you do static analysis on, you need to make sure that there is a strict automated process of actually triaging and reviewing these false positives. So you need to make sure that for the developers, it's really easy to, for example, a request for a review of a false positive, and it also needs to be done in a timely fashion. That's of course for the source code that we are building ourselves. But next to that, ABN AMRO is also a huge supporter of open source and is using a lot of open source dependencies and libraries. So again, for that, it's really important that you get insights into the issues and into the multiple like versions of from a library that exist. And this is something where Nexus lifecycle really helps us with by providing insights into can we upgrade this library, or should we maybe switch to a completely different library. So both the source code and open source libraries that we put inside of these containers is still really relevant and really important that this process you get right from the start before you even start with containers. Because once you start also dealing with containers, you also have findings from these containers. So make sure you take it step by step, and you make sure that also these findings from your source code and your open source libraries are being addressed correctly and automatically, of course, in an enterprise. That's really important, because then the next step is that you start packaging these two together inside of inside of your containers and start running it in Kubernetes clusters or whichever orchestrator you're using. And then you add again another level of complexity, because now you suddenly have 3 factors to worry about. So it's really important to have the statistical analysis correctly in place as well, and to be able to address it quickly. So once we have taken that into account, we can start looking more into the container security aspects. And just like we mentioned, we are treating containers just like another software artifact. So what's really important is that we also, for example, do our syntax checks. So it's really important for us to have more metadata around the containers, so that we can really quickly identify, okay, to which team or which person does this container belong to, or who is even the maintainer of this this container. That's a really important aspect that we try to embed in ABN AMRO as well, because for such a large scale with so many teams, it becomes really a challenge to address these issues properly. Next to that, of course, I mean, we just talked about scanning open source libraries and finding out the CVEs, but the same applies to containers. So we also have our OS level dependencies that we need to make sure that don't contain any security issues where we actually don't want to accept this risk. So again, really important to scan for CVEs in your images. One big implementation that we have going on now in ABN AMRO is that we started looking more at the managing of secrets, because again, if you start this transformation and you end up with thousands of containers that basically also will need some kind of secrets to either access a database or do something else, you need to make sure that you properly manage these secrets at an enterprise scale. So again, managing secrets in containers and be able to inject them securely is a challenge that we are currently addressing, and that everyone should think about how this will be taken care of. Bad practices. So this is also something we want to catch really early on. So we make sure that developers are creating images or creating Docker files the right way and are not using commands that may not follow best practices or guidelines in that regard. Compliancy is of course for ABN AMRO a really big topic and a really important one. And to give an example, we have a lot of developers that still don't understand the risk and impact of running containers as root, for example. So this is something that we also need to take care of, and we need to address these compliancy issues, and we need to make sure that developers understand why, for example, they should not be running containers as root. So compliancy stuff again is also really important for us. And then basically this comes also this all boils down to basically the static part of containers and scanning the Docker file and images. But what happens when you start putting containers in production, right? You need to make sure that you know what's going on in production with these containers. So runtime protection is something really important that needs to be taken care of. What happens when you do this snapshot in time, where maybe something today is secure, but then when you deploy it in production and it runs in production, and then suddenly the next day, you have a security issue. So you need to make sure that also the running containers you have insights on, and you can quickly address those challenges. So these are like the most important container security aspects that we think on about now, and that we are trying to address within ABN AMRO. So next on, Wiebe will continue with actually the container platform that we are creating right now.
All right. Thank you, Dominik. So he briefly mentioned we are building a container platform. The reason to build our own container platform resides from the fact that there are now a lot of teams trying to deploy containers mainly on the public cloud in AWS and in Azure. And there was no standard way to do it. So some teams are using Amazon ECS. Some teams are trying to get a Kubernetes cluster running somewhere. Some teams are using Docker Swarm on Azure. Basically, our Jenkins environment's running Mesos Marathon, the orchestrator. We're moving towards Kubernetes with that, but we're not there yet. It's very important to mention it's all kinds of different flavors, and still the governance for a containers is somewhere in the middle, because a lot of people and teams still think it's like middleware. It's in between infrastructure and software. So we decided to explore all kinds of container platforms. We did some POCs with vendors, and we have set up a team to actually do all the container related stuff. So we set up a container expert team to take care of, for example, setting the standards, putting the security requirements in place, having the governance in place, And together with the team, we did, as mentioned, the proof of concepts. And when we analyzed all of the tools, we concluded, okay, we can use different building blocks to build our own platform. And these are all of the building blocks of that platform. I can speak about it for maybe an hour, but I won't do that because there's not so much time. This is a very important slide that was taken from that was also being presented at KubeCon in Barcelona some weeks ago. To briefly touch this, we have the infrastructure layer being backed by Amazon and Azure to do all the provisioning we need for the runtime container environments. We use Terraform and also CloudFormation templates and Azure ARM. We're moving towards Terraform. We're not there yet to support both the clouds. For a Docker registry, we use Sonatype Nexus. We're putting our Docker images in there because we already had Nexus, and now it has the possibility to store Docker images. And it makes sense because it's next to the other artifacts. We don't treat them as, well, infrastructure components or just plain zip files. We don't put it on Docker Hub because, yeah, we don't control that. And Nexus acts as the single source of truth for images. And it's very important to have a link back to the original repository where the source code for the Docker images are being stored. We're looking at the runtime level here. We have Docker as a container runtime. For networking, we're looking at CNI. We want to have everything CNI compatible. And the same goes for storage. We're looking into StorageOS, Portworx, and NetApp. We're not there yet. We still have EFS for persistent storage, but it's in the back of our minds. We're doing some experiments already for the 3 applications right here. And then on an orchestration level, we still have ECS there. There's still some teams running ECS, but we are shifting, just like the major industry. We are shifting towards EKS, Kubernetes, of course, and also AKS on Azure. What is very important here is this container platform is first being deployed in Amazon, based on Amazon EKS. So it's public cloud first. And then we have, of course, the application level. We will do our definitions and deployments based on Helm charts because we can use the best practices for Helm instead of Kubernetes files. As a very good orchestrator, as a very good deployment tool for our Docker images. We've now set up a simplified Helm chart repository. We put it in S3, for example. Maybe in the end, Sonatype Nexus repository, we can put Helm charts in there. I don't know. So then we can integrate that even further. And for the CI/CD part, as mentioned, we have Jenkins, but also parts of AWS, for example, code pipeline and code build, etc. For Docker security, Dominik just mentioned, very important aspect. We have Twistlog. We choose Twistlog to integrate all of the different phases for container security, also on the container platform level. We now have HashiCorp Vault for secrets management, and we push everything to CloudWatch and in the end to Splunk to have the monitoring and logging in place. So all of these bits and pieces, we think these are the best tools that serve best the needs that we have. And if we put it all together, in the end, we got a container platform that is as compliant as possible. So every single workload, even workloads processing very sensitive information, remember, we're a financial institute, we're a bank, should be able to be handled by the container platform. That's all the technical stuff, but there's also a lot of organizational challenges. If we only had the technical difficulties, which are still there, that was not a big deal. We have the organizational challenges. For example, the governance of Docker base images. Well, I can also talk, I don't know, maybe a couple of hours about this. It's very difficult to get this done correctly. Infrastructure teams say, well, we can take care of it, but we don't know what to create. Which kind of Docker images are important? How do we structure that? What do you need from a developer perspective? Developers say, oh, I just want to put my application somewhere in a Docker image coming from Docker Hub, deploy it, and I'm fine. But we have the container expert team taking care of this by providing some base, some set of base images, which can be extended by teams, but also can be improved by teams. So we make it public for the teams within ABN AMRO, because if we are the only team providing base images, then we will become the next bottleneck, and we want to avoid that. So that's how we tackle that. We have to think of a Docker registry at scale. We already have Nexus. Nexus is running for all of the teams, and we added some extra Docker repositories, for example, a public repository in which everyone can pull images, and then specific repositories to push Docker images. It's just in the same registry, and it serves as fine because the teams know how to interact with it, and they can use their existing structures and credentials to use Docker images. So that's making the adoption of containers a little bit more easy for them. And of course, container security, it's all about signing and approving images. When is an image good enough? If it hasn't got any criticals, in our opinion, it's not just security. It should also be approved by an expert team or another authority, like a CISO department, for example, indicating these kind of images are approved for the development teams. You can use them safely. You don't need to worry about it. So it's also about structuring the Docker images. For example, there should also always be a maintainer. If there's no maintainer, no one knows who should patch it when there's something wrong. If you then reuse that image, then you have a problem if there's something going on in production that needs to be patched immediately. So it's very important to review the security issues, not just the Docker images from the development teams, but also the base images, not only on a code level or on a build level, but also on a runtime level. So to give you a very simple example, if someone tries to deploy a container in a Kubernetes cluster that has the privileged flag, we will not even run that. We have OPA, the Open Policy Agent. We have Twistlock to prevent running a container that violates basically everything by switching off security if you set the privileged flag to true. So that's like an example of shifting left, because the developer will get immediately feedback about that violation. So we then don't need to review that. It's already there. It's being blocked. And with all of this, the role of metadata is very important. So I just mentioned it's very important to have, for example, a maintainer, but it's also very important to have lifecycle information about the Docker image. You have to write down a summary and a description. Where is this image good for? What is the specialty for that image? Also, they should be versioned and not just tagged, because that's like a technical version, to say it like that, but also a version of the Docker image itself. And then you know, oh, this is having this life cycle, including if you upgrade it, for example, if it's backward compatible with an older version, for example. So the role of metadata is very important, and we'd like to see teams also using Docker images from the perspective of Nexus, of course, that's being able to see the source code of it. So people should have a link between Nexus and the original source of the Docker image, so they can review themselves if this Docker image is good for them or not. And with all of these challenges, we also have to have a big collaboration of teams here, because we can't do it all alone. So that's something we really take care of that. And of course, there's another big issue here. It's the drift of containers versus images. It's like what's running where, and where does the source comes from. You need to trace it back. And so we're not completely ready with that yet, because we can't link everything to each other, but we try to have the CI and the CD phase linked together, so we can trace containers running in production. We can trace it all back to the original source code and version. So those are like the most important organizational challenges. Dominik will do the conclusions and some takeaways, and this is it from my part.
Yeah, so thank you, Wiebe. So what is, of course, we have seen now throughout this presentation is that for any DevSecOps for any DevSecOps transformation, it's really important to start with the people aspect. Wiebe already mentioned a few of the organizational challenges, that you will be facing or that we are facing when we are in this transformation, because we are going from completely different environments, and from a static one where we trusted everything to a dynamic one spread over multiple clouds, or running containers. So also the way of working is changing, and people need to be able to make that transition as well. And next to that, I mean, for an enterprise, to have a good organizational governance is really important to be able to somehow keep control, or be in control over this transformation. And of course, we talked a little about. I also talked a little about the automation for having security issues triage. The processes are really important, right? Processes need to change in order to adapt to this new way of working, and to be able to have everything automated, where teams are not being blocked by a central team, but basically are enabled to make the right decisions themselves. And in case they have any questions, in an automated way, they can express those concerns, and a central team can help out. But it's about having the correct automated processes in place as well. For example, the onboarding. It's really important to have that automated, and not have a central team blocking teams from using different kind of tools or platforms. And once you have defined defined these two aspects, then it's important to start looking at the technology, right? At the tools. We see a lot of times that a tool is just being picked, and then processes and governance tries to be implemented around it, but it should actually be the other way around. Because if you know correctly what the process should be, then you also know what kind of requirements you need for the tool, because the tool, of course, should support those processes and the governance around it. So it's really important to have clear, let's say, clear requirements and clear processes, so that you can make the right decisions for the technology you use. So these are like the three key aspects where we spend a lot of time also at ABN AMRO to think about how to do this correctly, because we want to adopt these new technologies, and we want to adopt the technology that basically enables ABN AMRO to become one of the leading fintech banks. And in order to do that, we need to do this controlled. So this is really important.
Great, thank you very much. People are in the Slack channel for you for questions. Thank you so much. It's always great to hear from you guys and what you've been working on. So jump over to Slack. People are waiting for you there, and we'll talk to you in a bit.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.